Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let's continue chapter 13. We're talking about the mechanism of evolution. We're talking about natural selection. Natural selection says that nature favors some individuals over others. And what that further means is that this leads to unequal reproductive success. This means that not every individual will have the same chance to have babies as every other individual. If that were the case, then some people's genes will become more common in the next generation as they have more babies than other people's do, the people who don't have children or don't have as many children. So natural selection has two features, and the two features are that nature will favor certain conditions, certain features over others. And tied to that, because certain individuals are therefore more favored than others, those individuals will have more kids. If they have more kids, that means that their genes will be a higher percentage of the genes in the next generation. Remember, a population can change. A population can adapt to the environment. An individual can't. It comes through natural selection and unequal reproductive success. Sometimes it's not nature that does the choosing. Sometimes it's humans that do the choosing, and this is called artificial selection. This is when humans decide which traits become more common, which traits get concentrated in the next generation. If we look at these different pigeon species, we can see the pigeon in the center. Just like pretty much dogs and cats and even goldfish, there are people that raise pigeons, and because they raise pigeons, they buy and sell and trade pigeons back and forth. And when you do that, if you get an odd pigeon through a random mutation, other people are going to go, ooh, I want that one. That one's different. That one's wild. Like this one right here, the frillback. And if you can't see it so well in this picture, please do make sure that you've downloaded the actual PowerPoints from D2L, and you can get a much better look at these different pigeons that we see. The frillback. Do you think that individual can fly? With those messed up feathers like that, there's no way at all that that animal is going to be able to fly. And if it can't fly, is that individual going to do well in the wild? No, that's one of the random mutations that if this were in the wild, that individual would not survive, and therefore that mutation would not stay in the population. But because humans are deciding who breeds, this thing doesn't have to hunt for itself, this thing doesn't have to provide for itself, humans are providing everything for it. And so mutations like this, and like this, and like this, and that, they can stay in a population because humans are deciding, oh, I like that trait, so I'm going to breed those two individuals that happen to possess that trait. And then they're going to continue to do that down the line of the organisms. Do you think this individual with these huge feathers around their feet, do you think they can fend for themselves in the wild? Do you think they're going to do as well as one that doesn't have those giant feathers around their feet? Look at that weird body shape of this fantail thing. How well do you think that thing would do on its own? And the answer is not very well. So why do they persist in the population? It's not because nature says, I want you to look like this. Nature wants them to look like that. Humans. Artificial selection. Pretty much any animal you think of that people keep as pets. Dogs, cats, chickens, snakes, frogs, lizards, all kinds of animals. People have selectively bred them to select for different traits. Think of all the different dog breeds you can imagine. Think of all the different kinds of cows you can imagine. All the different kinds of sheep and horses. And those have been selectively bred from a parent stock. Natural selection. The first thing to remember, an individual does not change. An individual does not evolve. Evolution is the accumulation of traits in a population. Evolution is the change in the percentages of genes in a population over time. An individual cannot evolve. Only populations do. Natural selection can only amplify or diminish traits. It does not create them. So important to understand. And that is that natural selection is not a creative process. Natural selection is an editing process. Natural selection can only cut out things that don't fit. It doesn't make new things. What does make new things? Mutation. Mutation makes new things. And when you think of mutation, you think of like people with arms growing out of their heads and stuff like that. You think of like crazy stuff, and that's generally not what a mutation is. Most of the time, a mutation is bad, but very rarely a mutation, a random change in a gene sequence, can be good. Very rarely can be good. Most of the time it's bad. Evolution is ongoing. It's not goal-directed. It doesn't have some end purpose in mind. Evolution is natural selection is all about surviving when? Today. It's all about surviving today. Only the individuals that survive today can have babies tomorrow. Darwin, when he was on the Galapagos Islands, he looked at those marine iguanas, he looked at those giant tortoises. He also looked at finches. One very interesting thing to note is that all of the birds, all of the tree birds, seabirds can travel very long distances, and there are lots of different seabirds that you find on the Galapagos Islands. But as far as tree birds, ordinary birds that you see in the trees, ones that are not ocean going, ones that just stay on land, he noticed that all of the birds were all finches. What's a finch? A cardinal. Some people call them redbirds. A redbird has that very characteristic big, thick beak. That's a finch. A cardinal is a big finch. Darwin noted that all of the tree birds, all of the ordinary birds on the islands were all finches, and that is really strange. Why weren't there sparrows? Why weren't there swallows? Why weren't there blackbirds? Why weren't there bluebirds? Why were there only finches? That's what sparked him, and that's what got him thinking about this thing that we now call evolution. The guess is that what likely happened is at least a pregnant female, but more likely a population, a small group of finches somehow got blown onto the islands. It's possible that through some sort of a natural disaster, like maybe a hurricane or a tsunami or something like that, swept a population of these birds in a debris raft. Just imagine like a big tangle, a big gnarly mess of logs that a few birds were stuck on, and because they're not seabirds, because they're just tree birds, they had nowhere to go, and they got lucky and landed there on the Galapagos, and then they were able to survive. But if it's just one population of birds, we're saying that's all one species. All one species of bird. And when Darwin gets there, a few hundred thousand years later, maybe a few million years, he sees there's a bunch of different species. But how are they all related? They're all finches. It's very likely that the way that we went from one species to many different species is through different food availabilities. In dry years, large, strong beaks are favored, which finches have anyway. Large, strong beaks are favored, and that group of animals did well. In wet years, small, slim beaks are favored because there's lots of these little bitty seeds. In that year, in those times, then small, slim beaks are favored. And what this means is you've got a few different populations now. You have two different groups of animals. These like to hang out where the small seeds are found. This group likes to hang out where the big, hard nuts are found. And because now they're operating, now because they're hanging out in different parts of the forest, it means that they don't spend a lot of time together. And so slim-beaked birds have babies with slim-beaked birds, giving birth to slim-beaked birds. Thick-beaked birds hang around with other thick-beaked birds, and therefore give birth to thick-beaked birds. And through food choice brought on through different seasonal variations, you can actually end up with multiple populations.